Hi everyone, welcome back to Emily Moon English. This episode of Moon Chat is going to be our last episode in this apartment. It's been 1 year since we moved here, so we wanted to film a Moon Chat reflecting on our past year in America, which is actually your first year living in America as a permanent resident and working.
Yeah.
So before we move out, I thought this would be a good time to have a conversation. So the first thing I wanted us to talk about was what were some things that you had to get used to this year? What was different coming from Korea, moving to America?
First, here in America, I had to drive everywhere with my car. That is the biggest difference from living in Korea.
But here things are much more spread out than in Korea, right? So places that maybe you could walk to in Korea, it's impossible to walk to, or it would take a really long time to walk to.
Yes. Especially in my town in Gwangju in Korea. Everything is near my house,
Right.
like such as
Anything you
grocery store, sometimes all different types of restaurants, hospital, and banks.
Right. Even though we live now in the DC area, Washington DC area, and there is a metro system and there are buses, even in our neighborhood, it's definitely not the same, and it's much easier to drive if you have a car. So we do have a car, so I'm sure that took some getting used to, driving all day, everywhere.
The first thing I did when I got to the state was, getting the driver license.
So what were some other things that you had to get used to?
I had to get used to packing lunch.
Packing lunch? Did you not pack lunch in Korea?
Never.
What did you do for lunch?
Usually I just eat out. Just eat out because the restaurants everywhere. It's not very expensive, so I don't have to pay tips.
That's true. There isn't a tipping culture in Korea when you go to restaurants, but there is a tipping culture here. Even for lunch, if you are served by a waiter or a waitress, you tip usually 15-18%, so it can get much more expensive very quickly.
So I pack lunch all the time, every morning, while I'm eating breakfast. And also I cook dinner a lot, like every day, like 98% of the time. I make dinner. So basically I make breakfast, lunch, and dinner at home. That's my life.
And I do the dishes.
So I know
he's the cook in the family.
So you make some food, but mostly I make it. But I like it, so my cooking skills definitely improved since I got here.
Yeah, and you learned how to use lots of different ingredients that weren't available in Korea. But I won't say that you only eat Western food, because we live close to a Korean grocery store. So we eat a lot of Korean food at home. So in that way, we haven't changed that much from living in Korea. So for another thing that you had to get used to, I would say the pace of life is very different here and in Korea. It's a little bit more simple life, especially where we live, because we don't live right inside Washington, D.C. We're kind of outside, where it's a little bit slower. So yeah, did you have to get used to that? Was that hard or different for you?
Yes, back in Korea, on the weekends I used to meet my friends, just eating out together or drink coffee at the cafe. That was my life. But here, I have some friends, but I don't meet them regularly outside. We sometimes invite people over to our house and they just eat dinner together, but there's no such a culture, eating out together all the time.
So life is definitely a little bit more simple here. You're still making friends. So would you say overall your change from kind of busier life to more simple life, is that a good thing, a bad thing? What do you think?
Simple life in America is good for me so far. because it was pretty crazy living in Korea, like really busy. But here it's more relaxing and peaceful.
Yeah.
I know there's not much things to do, but I think that's kind of plus.
It's definitely been a more relaxing year than it had been when we lived in Korea. I would agree. So we talked about things that you had to get used to, but was there anything that was like really surprising to you that you didn't expect when you moved from Korea to here?
So I would say the gap between poor people and rich people are significantly different. And because through my job, I was able to see the poor people, like they were like living in a really poor area. The rich people, like living in the like gigantic like, mansions, really wealthy.
And that's because we live close to Washington, D.C., so there are some very, very, very rich people, but also living in kind of the same area as some very, very, very poor people. So I'm sure that's surprising coming from Korea where the gap is not as large.
I mean, of course, there are really fancy area in Seoul or around Seoul area, but I was not aware of that big gap in Korea compared to living here.
So I also wanted us to reflect on the last year and talk about what was our biggest challenge living here. And so I think something that was the most challenging for us this year was this was actually our first time living together alone. We've been married for over 4 years now, and we've been together almost 7 years. But this is actually our first year that we lived together. We, of course, were together during that time, but never living alone for lots of different reasons. So that story will be a different moon chat. But yeah, this is our first year living together. So that, I think, was a challenge. We had to get used to how to compromise and how to live together, work together to have a home where it's just the two of us.
Because we grew up in a different culture and different backgrounds, so it was like 1 year period is adjusting time for both of us to live in the same place, even as a marriage couple. So biggest challenge was for me is learning how to divide our chores and becoming one team.
Yeah, working together. So of course there were also good things that happened this year too. So I want to end our conversation on a positive note by sharing what we think is our biggest success from this past year. So for me, it would be finishing graduate school, got my master's degree. That was, this year will be very memorable.
The biggest success for me is learning a lot about American culture and working as a worker in America and how much I can fit in this American society as an immigrant.
Right, and with your coworkers too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I was able to work with many different backgrounds, different ethnicities.
Yeah, it's definitely a more diverse group of people and coworkers and friends than you've ever had in your life, right?
And the age range from 18 through 60
at your company.
at my company.
Yeah.
So it was more diverse than any other experience.
Yeah, that's definitely a really important part of coming to America. You got a lot more diversity than you had back home in Korea. Yeah.
So I feel like I passed the test living in America by learning American culture, and I think also I can continue to live here in America.
Yeah, I can say from experience that the first year in the new country is the hardest. I had a really hard time my first year in Korea, but looking back on that year, I learned so much. So I think it's really cool to reflect on our first year here in America before we leave this apartment. So I think this was a really great conversation, great way to end our time here in this lovely apartment. Please be on the lookout for our next few videos from our new temporary location before we move into a real location. It's gonna be kind of a crazy summer for us. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, keep learning. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to subscribe.
And
hit the smash.
hit the smash. Smash the like button.
And hit the smash.
No, smash the
Smash
like
the
button.
like button. Forget about it.
I'm gonna add that.